Hey guys, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics. Welcome back to my show Histrionics, where every week we tackle women's issues from a centrist point of view. If you like this episode, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check out others in my series. If you're listening on audio, make sure you drop by Apple iTunes and leave me a review. I would love to read your thoughts. In conversations I've observed online in the manosphere and the red pill community, and also lately in my comment sections, there is a lot of hatred that is directed at single moms. What I don't hear nearly enough about, though, is deadbeat dads. We have an epidemic of fatherlessness going on in this country, and we don't talk about it nearly enough because the impacts of that epidemic are humongous. And in order to have this conversation thoroughly, which I intend to do today, we have to actually define what we mean by fatherlessness, because I think it actually comes in many shapes and sizes. So to start out, we're going to have to talk about the actual absence of fathers who are just completely MIA, because I think there's actually many kinds of fatherlessness, but a lot of them are hard to quantify or track, whereas this one is a little bit easier to actually get hard numbers on. So first, the percentage of American children growing up without a father can vary depending on the specific criteria used to define growing up without a dad: absence from the home, lack of involvement, etc. According to data from the U.S. Census Bureau, as of 2020, about 18.4 million children, which is approximately 25% of all children in the U.S., live without a biological step or adoptive father in the home. That is a stunning number of people with zero, and I mean zero, father figures in their home. And as you might have guessed, this was not always the case. Historically, more children lived in two-parent households with both biological parents. If you look at the mid-20th century, in the 1950s and 1960s, around 85% of children lived with both biological parents. Divorce rates were lower and fewer children were born out of wedlock. When you get to the 1970s to the 1990s, divorce rates started to increase, leading to more single-parent households. By 1980, about 61% of children lived with both biological parents. The rise in births to unmarried mothers also contributed to the decline. And then you get to the 2000s to present day, where the trend has continued with some fluctuations. As of recent data, around 60 to 70% of children live with their biological father at least 50% of the time. Overall, the proportion of children living with both biological parents has decreased over the past several decades, reflecting changes in societal norms, divorce rates, and family structures. I think it does reflect all of those things, but I think more importantly, more significantly, it reflects the lack of shame men feel these days about abandoning their kids and their partners and their wives. Shame is a very powerful tool that I think is vastly appropriate in most situations. Too often when we talk about issues like this, people want to immediately turn to the government for solutions, and I think that that is asinine. Very, very rarely can the government solve any problem. But it is especially bad at solving problems that relate to the heart. And I think when you look at the epidemic of men who are straight up abandoning their kids, that is a heart problem. That's a sin problem. That is a character flaw. That is not something the government can fix. But shame can go a very long way in fixing people who don't have any morality of their own. And I think that's really what we've seen dissipating in the culture over time in many facets, but certainly when it comes to the shame society places on people who abandon their kids and families, who don't do their duty and take care of what they produce.
We don't shame deadbeat fathers enough, and that is something that really frustrates me, because shame is actually a pretty effective tool in creating change in society. What do I mean? If you went into a town square and you slapped the hell out of somebody's grandmama, I'm sure everybody in that town square would look at you with disgust, and you would feel shamed within, right? When we look at these deadbeat dads with the same disgust as we look at other people who do things that are heinous, I believe that truly we can shift the narrative in how they behave and act with these children. There is no way on God's green that any of these men deserve a pass for coming out of the woodworks decades late into their children's lives, having the ability to step away and allowing these mothers to raise these children without any of their assistance. These men deserve to be shamed. Oh, and I mean that these men should not be able to walk across the street without being booed. Like, they need to be ostracized from certain aspects of society. If you don't want to be a participating member and like actually taking care of your responsibilities, you need to be shunned. If you're a man and you have children and you only see your children like maybe 1 or 2 days a week or not at all, I'm talking to you, motherfucker. You are included in this. Take care of your kids. And I hate to say it so blatantly, but somebody got to say it. Take care of your kids.
I agree with him that somebody has to say it. And personally, I love seeing a man say it because women have been saying it for some time. Women are having these conversations, and it's women who get left with the short end of the stick when men do dip out. But the problem is that so many men have not been held accountable by other men, by their friends, by their peers, by their families. And that's what needs to change. It used to be that the vast majority of people were in church. So men at least had other families around them. They had pastors, they had mentors, they had other people around them that were pillars in their community that were going to check them if they stepped out of line. And there just is something more powerful about a man holding another man accountable. It's different than being checked by another woman. I wanted to go into the comments of this video when I saw it because I love it. I love to see strong men rising up. I've said over and over in the show, I love real healthy masculinity. And this is it. They call out wrongdoing. They check other men. They hold them accountable. One person said single mothers get shamed more than deadbeat dads. And yes, they do. And it makes absolutely no sense, which I'll get into a little bit more in this episode, but it blows my mind the smoke people have for women who are holding it down and taking care of their kids and rising up to their responsibilities versus the men who refuse to. Another person said, we are quick to shame a single mother. One said, here come the men saying my baby mama don't let me see my kids, which yeah, right. I'll touch on that in a minute. Another person said, deadbeat dads hurt everyone. It's a generational curse. I think that's a theme you're going to see come up over and over in this episode because it absolutely is. Now, as you all know, if you watch me, I grew up as a Christian, so I'm very familiar with the language around generational curses. In case you're not, I'll give a little explainer, but for many people who are religious, particularly in Protestant denominations, there is a theory of generational curses, and that is to say that the sins of the father and mother trickle down and impact the children and the next generation and the next generation. And even if you're not religious, I think you can see similar themes that come up in psychology, they come up in sociology. It can be simplified down to sayings like hurt people hurt people. You could get into the scientific side of this with studies like epigenetics that actually have found the genetics of people. Their DNA is impacted based on the DNA of their fathers and their mothers and trauma that they went through that they then pass down genetically to their kids. You can approach this from whatever lens you want to, but the facts remain the same no matter which way you're looking at it. And that is the fact that what parents do have tremendous impacts on their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. So yes, deadbeat dads do hurt everybody for generations, and their kids are more likely to repeat that pattern and that behavior. It's a very, very sad thing. Another person said, single moms get shamed for not picking better. They want us to sit in our mistakes. Yes, they do. And I've addressed this on the show before, but the idea that all these women are just morons and are just picking badly is ridiculous. Yeah, some of them do, of course. Some women have bad judgment. Some women have bad morals themselves. Some women are not very wise. But a whole lot of women are getting completely tricked and bamboozled into relationships with these men. They're often with men who are intentionally getting them pregnant to trap them. And the idea that because somebody ends up having a kid with a deadbeat male, they should be penalized for that, that they're a bad person, or that the blame should fall on them versus the man who is failing to do his job is insane. Another person wrote in his comment, shaming deadbeat parents starts at home. I love this one. They said their parents, aunts, uncles, kids, etc. need to be the loudest shamers, not the biggest enablers. Oh my gosh. Yes, preach, speak on it. So often when you see these deadbeat men, they are picking up other women. They are able to start second families. Other women are agreeing to have kids with them. Their parents are still like, oh, our sweet baby boy is just so great. What is wrong with you people? If my brother acted a fool like this, I would be like hunting him down, tying him up by his legs and dragging him back to his family. And so would my parents. And if he were to try to pull any of this, he would be cut off from our family. Like, we would not have any dealings with him. It blows my mind to watch families and kids and people close to men enable this kind of behavior. Like, I would be so embarrassed to be related to somebody like this, much less to be friends with them. Another person said, society would rather shame the mother than the man. Crazy. And lastly, someone said, unfortunately, they continue to have more kids with the next woman who knows they're deadbeats who don't shame them. And I know inevitably when these conversations come up, you have a segment of men who are going to rush to the comments and claim that their baby mama is keeping their kids from them, that they can't get custody, that the courts are rigged against them. They have every excuse in the world for being an MIA father, but none of the data backs any of them up. I've covered this over and over on the show. I'll continue to do it. I have an entire episode on what actually goes down in divorce court and when custody battles come up. But just to refresh your memories, when men actually merely ask for custody, they get it. Study after study after study after study shows this. In fact, there are also studies that show when a woman alleges abuse, she is actually more likely to lose custody in many circumstances. So this entire narrative that these men have concocted is simply false. The vast majority of them are not trying to get custody. They are not trying to see their kids like that. Those that are, a good portion of them are just trying to not pay child support, and they don't end up actually fulfilling their time that they get. And those that actually do lose their kids, can't get access to them, can't see them, it is often for a very, very good reason. So if you as a woman are being told by some man who has a kid that he does not see, that it's outside his control and he can't help it and he's the victim, wake up, wise up. That's not the case. You need to do some digging. I just cannot fathom entertaining a man who had a kid that he was not involved with. Can't fathom it. Like, the audacity, much less choosing to procreate with him again. I don't know how stupid you'd have to be to do that. I really, truly don't. But it's really down. It's down here. Furthermore, there's also a category of men who have kids they're not involved with who will claim that the mom won't let them see them. But in reality, the kid is refusing to see them, refusing to have anything to do with them because they have watched their father's crappy behavior over a period of time and want nothing to do with them.
Hello? Yeah. Want to talk to my kid? All right, hold on. Hey, your dad's here on the line. Do you want to talk to him? Ew. No. He said no. He doesn't want to talk to you. You're a liar. My son does want to talk to you. You're bitter, and you're keeping me from him. You just won't let me talk to him. No, I just asked him. He doesn't want to talk to you. You're a liar. Give me the phone, Mom. Okay. I don't want to talk to you. Period. Now, you listen to me. Everything your mom said about me is lies. She lies to you to make me look like the bad guy. Look, man, the things I've seen you do with my own two eyes is the reason why I don't want to talk to you. Mom doesn't talk about you. The only time she ever brings you up is when you call. And the only dad that I have isn't you, it's my stepdad. You're just a stranger. I'm so sick of everyone making me out to be the bad guy. You know, everyone's out to get me. No, you don't understand, man. You wait until you get older. You don't understand the shit that I go through in my life. I am your dad. Okay. Are you laughing at me right now? Don't you dare laugh at me. I'm not. I'm sorry, man. I just can't take you seriously right now. Like, not you crying on the phone. I gotta go. Yeah, I gotta go. Oh my God.
The reality is there are far more women holding it down, paying the bills, taking care of their kids than there are single men doing that in reverse. And it should not shock anybody that when the mom is the primary caregiver, the kid takes note and doesn't want anything to do with the dad over time. And yet you continue to see this hate directed at single moms like incessantly. It doesn't make any sense to me. I do not understand the animosity. I don't know if it's because the manosphere has this perception that like most single moms are choosing this because of these made up narratives they keep pushing around custody. Like, I know a significant portion of them literally think that women are just like, la, 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 let's get married, ruin my body, push a kid out, then have a great time getting divorced and just sit here and collect alimony and child support. Like, most men are not making that much money for the alimony and child support to even be present, much less like a cushy lifestyle. Obviously, these rates differ based on your income and where you live, but I looked up the average child support payment in Georgia, and it's $400 to $500 a month. That doesn't even cover most people's car payment. And alimony is only granted in like 10 to 15% of cases, typically only in situations where the marriage has lasted at least a decade or longer and when one spouse makes drastically more than the other. Again, that's not most of these men. And as I've said before, just because women are filing the paperwork doesn't mean that they caused the divorce. They're often responding to very crappy situations that they're in. And even when they do file divorce, it doesn't mean that they like ride off into the sunset. In fact, statistics show that they often not only end up with the custody, meaning they have to figure out childcare, they have to adjust their lives around the kids, they have to pick up the bulk of the expenses. This burden also often pushes them into poverty. It's actually still men who do financially better after a divorce. So, given that reality, please explain to me, like I'm 12, the weird animosity for single moms.
Why is no one talking about the amount of shaming that single moms get on this app? I am a narcissistic abuse survivor, and I like to talk about the realistic life of a single mother after being abused by a narcissist. The amount of negative comments that I get about being a single mom is really crazy. In the comments, it was a lot of men that clearly looked like they were probably the toxic individual saying things like, you need to take accountability. I got a whole post on single mom accountability. And even in that post, people were still saying, oh, you're so entitled. And I'm just like, what do you want us single mothers to do? We're trying to heal so that we can raise amazing children and continue to be positive citizens in the world. Yet you want us to feel miserable and just basically shrivel up and die with cats. A lot of these single moms that were commenting, some of them were previously married and the person was abusive. The person just literally woke up one day and said, I don't want to do this anymore. There was another chick, she said her guy passed away, and people still talk negatively about us as if like this is what we asked for. I think that's really wrong. Something else I noticed is that I think people expect us to be loud and belligerent, but really, maybe I'm just an anomaly. I am actually pretty soft-spoken about this issue and understanding because I want to hear the person's point of view before I speak. So I think that's really wrong. They want us to get like, I'm not a bitter baby mama. I'm in my process of healing, and we gonna keep it real peaceful around here because I already been through too much. There was a post a chick made that she had a few kids and she found the love of her life. And a guy literally wrote in the comment section saying, oh, he's stupid. He'll never have a legacy. Damn, so we can't even find love after we lost the first time? That's crazy. Everybody deserves love. But one crazy thing I noticed is that there are a lot of very, very successful millionaires and billionaires that were raised by single mothers. Not every person who has a single mother, who was raised by a single mother, is going to be in jail, is going to have these crazy problems. Some women really, really make sure they raise their children properly. Somebody asked me yesterday, well, why didn't your children's father marry you? Because he was really abusive emotionally and mentally, so I left. Please be kind. We're trying our best, and you really have no idea what we have been through.
It always kind of makes me giggle when it's always men are like, oh my God, you're not going to have a legacy if you don't have kids. Like, some of us are actually going to leave a legacy based on things we do, not just procreating. And honestly, most people's kids are like not a legacy. They're just regular humans. So if that's the only way you have to feel special about your life, like examine that probably. But back to the heart of what she's saying, this is the prevalent attitude. And I feel so bad for these women because, again, they are the moral, upstanding citizens. They should be getting all of the support and flowers in the world. I went to her comments too. One person said, most of the men shaming single moms were raised by one. So I'm trying to figure out who they really talking junk about, me or your mama. I have tended to notice this a bit to the extent that I can online, but I haven't fully analyzed it yet. I'm curious, why do you think that is? Have you noticed it? Leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts if you have insights on that, because it definitely does seem to be a trend. Another person said, the amount of times I heard, well, you picked him is absurd. I did pick him, but I was blindsided by him being a deadbeat. Never saw it coming. This notion that women just like the bad boy, love the rush, and then they get stuck with this like obvious bad person. Again, it's fiction. Most women are not after the bad guy. Now, they might be attracted to somebody who is spontaneous, who's adventurous. Maybe some of the traits that they are initially interested in could be red flags in some scenarios. But the vast majority of the time, these women are getting tricked. I love this tweet I saw that says, please stop saying women fall for the wrong men when men be faking their personality the whole time. And a lot of them do. A lot of them are. And I don't know if it's because they don't truly know themselves, if they're all just like completely covert narcissist or what is going on, but I've experienced this. And again, if you've got examples of women doing this to you, let me hear them. I'm open to hearing this, but anecdotally in my life and in my very extensive amount of time on the internet listening to people's stories, I do not hear the equivalent of this happening to men by women. Men are far more likely, in my opinion, to fake their entire personality, to put on a facade, to lure you in, and then to entrap you before they show their true colors. Another commenter said, they love to shame us for being the parent who's doing it all alone. One person said, it's seriously alarming, support single moms. And then lastly, one person said, previously married to a narcissist abuser and chose to be a single mom. I'll take the stigma judging over how I was treated. To me, when I see a single mom, my first instinct is not to judge her, not to look down on her, not to assume that she did something wrong, but to say, what happened to you? Because I can't imagine being that vulnerable. As I've said ad nauseum, I'm not having kids. Nothing about it appeals to me. The very notion of it really makes me queasy. But if I were to go down that pathway, that would be an extremely vulnerable position to put yourself in, not just physically, but emotionally and financially. Like the amount you would need to feel secure with a man to even be willing to take that on is tremendous. And I simply cannot believe that there is a significant percentage of women who are just willy-nilly out here getting pregnant without a care in the world as to how that man's going to act or what his role is going to be like. I think the vast majority of them have gotten themselves in very, very unfortunate circumstances and are honorably doing the best that they can given those factors. And again, for the men that do have all of this like hatred and animosity for single moms, what would you prefer they do? Would you prefer they abandon their children? Would you prefer they never find another husband, never find love? What is the fate that would make you feel vindicated in this situation? And why do you, a person who is not involved, feel such a need for that vindication? It's seriously creepy and weird. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should be open to dating single parents, right? That is an entirely different calculation. Like I said, I never wanted to have kids. When I met my now husband, he did have kids. It took me a long time to decide if that was something I was willing to opt into. I took that very, very seriously. And had he had any other kids besides the ones that he has, I probably would have been out. I happen to love those kids and have had a great relationship with them from the very beginning. But if I were single again, if something were to happen to him, I would probably never again date somebody else with kids because it's just not something I really wanted for myself. I think if you are going to date somebody with kids, it's something you need to take very seriously. Being a step parent is an amazing contribution to society. It's an amazing thing to do, but it's not for everybody. And it certainly has its unique challenges. But whether or not you personally are willing to date somebody who has kids is an entirely different question. You cannot be open to dating somebody who has kids without this feeling of hostility towards them. That's what's really weird to me. And I also think it's interesting because I often hear the red pill talk about women having standards that are too high and women want this, women want that. But in all actuality, I think it's often many of them whose standards are too high because a lot more women are willing to date men who have kids than vice versa, in my experience. There are a lot of really good people who have ended up being single parents through no fault of their own. And so to discount them, to write them off, to act like they're damaged goods because of that factor, it actually says a lot more about you. And if you're finding that you cannot find a partner and you're finding that the people that you think are your equals or who are maybe slightly above you, like aren't interested in you, maybe you need to examine your own standards, evaluate what you're looking for, see if your principles are in order. I think one of the dominant principles of this show is that people, both men and women, often value the wrong things in a partner. And they get really caught up in things that don't matter at all, and they discount good quality people because of arbitrary things. Again, I'm not saying somebody having kids is arbitrary. It is a big responsibility to take on. But if you're somebody who's open to kids in general, somebody else having kids already, I don't really know why that would be such a huge lifestyle adjustment for you. Again, many single parents were absolutely blindsided. And this actually sort of fits into the red pills narrative more than almost anything else I'll say on this show. They have this whole theory that there's all these people out there who are in good marriages, and then the woman just ups and leaves and divorces them, and they didn't do anything wrong, and she's just out for their money, which I don't think is true most of the time. But if you actually do believe that, then how do you think so many people end up as single parents, right? A lot of them are being left by people, never married by people in the first place. They're losing their partners to death. Some of them end up being with abusive people or addicted people and leaving for the health of their children. I don't know how I got on abandoned pregnant woman TikTok, but I've been on it for a minute and it is horrifying. There are so many sweet, beautiful women I have seen sharing their experiences on that app, talking about the experience of being pregnant, many of them very far along, and having their husband or the father of their child just up and leave.
So he was defending that the woman in the scenario. He's like defending her to me. And he said she had sex with a single man. And I said, what single man? And he said, me, about himself. And I said, what? And he said, I was single. He said, when I went to Mexico, you were my pregnant ex-girlfriend. If you're new here, I'm pregnant by my boyfriend of 7 years, and we have a 5-year-old together. And this man literally is telling me, the person in the relationship telling me that he was single.
Raise your hand if you've ever been broken up with because you are considered boring. So to clarify, my kid's dad, who I've been with for 10 years, broke up with me on Tuesday of last week because I am boring. I don't bar hop. I don't go to the clubs. I'm not into that kind of shit anymore. I'm 35. We have a 6 and a 5-year-old. And honestly, the last thing I want to do is be hungover when I have my kids. I'm not above doing it every now and again, but his new favorite thing to do is go out every weekend and sometimes during the week and go on boys trips. And none of that has ever bothered me. If he goes out every now and again to hang out with his buddies, that it doesn't bother me. I encourage it. But it's become like a every weekend thing. And so since I spoke up and said that I think he needs to slow down and spend more time with his family, he broke up with me. Sorry, I had to take a little break there. Yeah. I'm cried out. I've done enough of that. I don't see myself going back after this because, like, it's embarrassing as I feel humiliated. I feel sad for my kids. I'm tired. I'm mentally drained as It feels like it's abusive almost. It's like by the time the summer ends, like, he begs me back and says that he'll change, and it never changes. So I don't know. Has anybody ever been through this? Because, like, I don't know. This sucks.
There is just zero excuse for that behavior. There's zero. I don't even care if you don't like your partner anymore. You had a whole child. You brought them into the world against their own volition, okay? And that's already a pretty questionable choice because this earth is, like, not the best. But you did that. You chose to do that. You owe them something, okay? And that is to work it out and to stay around. Now, I've said over and over, I only believe in divorce in a limited number of circumstances. I think if there is abuse, which is, it can be physical, it could be emotional, it could be mental, it could be financial, but abuse and cheating. But aside from those things, you have an obligation to work it out. Again, I think the loss of a sense of shame, the loss of religion in this culture has made it far more socially acceptable to procreate with abandon. The data is irrefutable on this. Kids do better when they have a stable, consistent two-parent home, period. End of story. Why people choose to have children outside of that kind of foundation blows my mind. It blows my mind, especially as a woman. It's to me like going bungee jumping. Like that's terrifying. Could not be me. Could not be me. Okay. But no matter what kind of, foundation or agreement you guys have, whether you're married or not, you still owe that child a lot. At the very least, you owe that child you being around and very present and active in their lives. And to the best of your ability, you owe it to that child to stay with the other parent, because it is traumatizing for children to have the opposite. It's traumatizing on the mom, and that impacts the kids, and it's traumatizing on the kids themselves. I think sometimes in this society, we bend over backwards to coddle people or to make them feel better about situations that are not ideal. And again, a lot of times these situations occur outside of the control of one person or the other. And for those people, single moms and single dads who end up in those situations outside of their own choices, I have the utmost sympathy, and they need to be given a ton of support. But what I don't think we need to do is come over here and tell them this is great, this is fine, it's just as good. No, I've been around children who have one or the other parent who has dipped out. It impacts them greatly. Even if they never even met that other parent, even if they've never known them, they want to know, where's my dad? Where's my mom? Why aren't they around? Do they love me? Did I do something wrong? Am I less valuable as a person because I wasn't enough for them to stay? It is the epitome of selfishness and low character to have a kid and then bounce on them. And again, I think these people should be shunned from society. That's the only answer, really, right? That's the only thing that's going to actually make them correct, because they are devoid of moral character. And so in order to get people like that to stand up and do the right thing, there has to be a societal structure that holds them accountable. There have to be serious negatives. There have to be disincentives for them to want to pursue this behavior. So all of this is one whole category of deadbeat dads, right? The dads that just completely dip out, disappear, are not present, are not active. I guess we'll say they're the lowest of the low. But then you have this whole other category of men who are around. They are present in their kids' lives, like they are living and breathing in the same room as them, but they are deadbeat dads. And their actions also have very significant consequences. Just because you have a man who is fully in the picture of a kid's life does not mean that kid has a good father.
I saw a video of an influencer stating how single moms get a lot of hate. Let's talk about it. This is something that I find to be very, very true. I get a lot of hate comments in my videos saying things like, oh, you're a single mom, people trying to use it as an insult. And people will tend to say this because I take care of myself. When I do wear makeup, I do my full face, I wear my cute outfits. And because I'm not the typical mom that they expect me to be, they will say these type of things. People saying, oh, you look like you have a lot of baby daddies. Oh, you look like you have a Jaden or Aiden. When in reality, I'm not a single mom. But even if I was, people tend to disregard the fact that it also takes a man to be a father, to be a parent, and to create a child. And when there is single dads, they are praised for being a parent. But single women are judged and are shamed. Why did you choose that baby father? Why did you lay up with him? Blah, 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 blah. But again, the absent father, the father that chose to walk out on their family or leave that child, is never blamed or is never judged. This is a reminder to all my women out there, whether you are a single mom or not, that does not define your worth. And at the end of the day, it is better to be a single happy mom than a single married woman, no matter who, what judges you or says otherwise. And this is something that is super common in our Latino community.
If you really go and listen to divorced women and to single moms and hear about how and why they ended up in these situations, this is the number one thing you will hear. It is not because they are financially benefiting from divorce, and certainly not from being a single mom. It is that the consequences of being a single mom and being strapped financially are still better than having a man who is a bonus child for you. This is not just a problem in the United States. This is a conversation that is happening globally, and boy, is it overdue. Because the number of men who are apparently completely fine sitting back and letting the woman in their lives do all of the heavy lifting is through the roof. I think this article in the BBC summarizes what this looks like pretty well. It's titled The Hidden Load, How Thinking of Everything Holds Mums Back. Mums, because they're British. And they write, organizing a play date or booking the kids' medical checkups, working out how to hide vegetables in the evening meals, or ensuring there's enough on the shopping list. Worrying about whether your son is on track at school, your daughter needs new shoes, and when to replace your washing machine. On their own, these may all seem like small tasks, but they mount up. And if you ask heterosexual couples with children which partner is most likely to handle them, it is probable that most would offer up the same answer: the mother. Numerous studies show that women in heterosexual relationships still do the bulk of housework and childcare. Many couples aim to split their responsibilities 50-50, yet for various structural and socioeconomic reasons end up allocating tasks along typically gendered lines. Even in couples who think that they have achieved an equal division of labor, the more hidden forms of care generally end up falling to the woman. In fact, an increasing body of research indicates that for household responsibilities, women perform far more cognitive and emotional labor than men. Understanding why could help explain why gender equality has not only stalled, but is going backwards, despite being more discussed than ever. And a broader understanding of this behind the scenes labor could help couples redistribute the work more equally, something that, while initially difficult, could play a significant role in helping mothers lighten their load. They go on to say that experts say that this hidden work comes in 3 overlapping categories. There's cognitive labor, which is thinking about all the practical elements of household responsibilities, including organizing playdates, shopping, and planning activities. Then there's emotional labor, which is maintaining the family's emotions, calming things down if the kids are acting up, or worrying about how they are managing at school. Third, the mental load is the intersection of the two, preparing, organizing, and anticipating everything, emotional and practical, that needs to get done to make life flow. This hidden work is hard to measure because it's invisible and performed internally, making it difficult to know where it starts and ends. In 2019, Allison Daminger, a doctoral candidate in sociology and social policy at Harvard University, found that while most participants in her study on cognitive household labor realized that women were doing the lion's share, this wasn't yet a normalized form of work. In the study of 35 couples, she found that men referred to their wives using terms such as project manager or said they were keeping track of more. In fact, Daminger identified 4 clear stages of mental work related to household responsibilities: anticipating needs, identifying options, deciding among the options, and then monitoring the results. Mothers did more in all 4 stages, her research showed. While parents often made decisions together, mothers did more of the anticipation, planning, and research. In other words, fathers were informed when it came to decisions, but mothers put in the legwork around them. This hidden work has various impacts. We know, for instance, that women are far more likely than men to worry about childcare, even when they are not with their children. It also causes additional stress because it is always present, even when you should be concentrating on other things. The mental load is that thread that brings the family into your work life, says Leah Ruppenar, an associate professor of sociology at the University of Melbourne and author of Motherlands. It's the constant low-level worry about whether we're doing enough and the impact our parenting will have on our children's future. You're always trying to mitigate future risk. She goes, they go on to note that there are structural reasons why women continue to take on more of the mental load. Women often find a way to work flexibly, whereas men's jobs are seen as more rigid, their careers more traditionally linear. This means women are more available for childcare, do more of it, and as a result have to think about it more. More powerfully, gendered expectations that start from birth can explain why ideas around who does the housework and childcare are so ingrained. Motherhood ideals also feed into this equation. For instance, the home is often seen as a woman's domain. We know that women are judged on neatness more harshly than men. One study showed that if identical rooms for a prospective rental property was said to belong to Jennifer rather than John, Jennifer was rated less likable, less competent, and less hardworking than John. The conclusion? The state of a woman's home was literally linked to her worth. Notice that they say women find a way to achieve more work-life flexibility. And I've used this over and over in debunking the gender pay gap, right? I've said that's not true. And it's not true. There's not a difference in what women are paid versus men when all things are equal. If they have the same amount of experience, the same kind of job, the same kind of education, same amount of time on the job, it's equal. The reason that you see this perpetual myth around the gender pay gap is because people tend to take an average of the salaries of what all women make and compare that to an average of the salaries of what all men make. And then, yes, you see a huge discrepancy, but it's because women choose different kinds of work, right? They are more likely to seek out work that has more flexibility, often because of their children. They are more likely to take time away from the workforce, again, because of their children. There is a cost-benefit thing that goes on here, and women tend to pick the kid. And while that's admirable, it also holds them back economically. Now, traditionally, if a man was the dominant partner bringing in the money, this was a pretty fair equation because the woman then had time to focus on the home and the children. But increasingly, that is no longer possible in most scenarios. And we can get into that in future economic discussions, but it is what it is. In most scenarios, both parents are having to work. Thus, the childcare and the housework should be divided up more evenly. Instead, what we see happening is continued gender norms around who does what in the home. So men tend to take on things like yard work, treating the pool, general maintenance around the house, things that come up only occasionally or every so often, whereas women still do the bulk of the everyday labor, the things that have to get done incessantly, like the laundry, like the dishes. And so all of that ends up in a situation where you have a lot of men who are simply not pulling their weight in their relationships and in their families. I could go on and on and on about that dichotomy because I think it is such a problem. And again, it is so pervasive across multiple societies right now. Something has to give, but I'll put a pin in it there. I want to draw your attention to a recent Am I the Asshole from Reddit that was posted by the Twitter account Ask Aubrey. Buckle up because it's infuriating. It's titled, Am I the Asshole for telling my husband that I would never agree to have his child if I knew he would go back on our agreement? She goes on to say, I, 36 female, am a neurologist, and I absolutely love my patients and my job. I believe there is no greater honor in life than being able to help others. The road to my medical degree was not easy, and it was paved with many rejections. I was a troubled teen in high school, and I didn't get accepted into any colleges my senior year. I had to work my way up, starting with remedial classes at my local community college. When I finally got into medical school at 26, I was absolutely thrilled. I met my husband, 37 male, in my third year of medical school. We have been married for 4 years now. My husband works in marketing and I make 3 times his salary. From the beginning of our relationship, I was very upfront that I was unsure about having biological children. My dream was always to adopt from foster care, and my husband seemingly understood this. However, after his best friend had a baby boy last year, he began to really press me on having children. I was initially very against the idea because I was just beginning my career. I wanted to wait a few more years before revisiting the topic of children. In August of last year, I found out I was unexpectedly pregnant due to a condom breaking during sex. Shocker. I was initially considering an abortion, but after many heartfelt conversations with my husband, we decided to keep the baby and he would quit his job and stay home until our daughter was old enough to start preschool. There were several factors that went into our decision to have him stay home with our daughter. 1, I make significantly more money than him, so financially it just made more sense. 2, I am in the first few years of my career as an attending physician. After 4 years of med school and a 4-year residency, I am just starting to practice on my own, whereas my husband has been in his career for 15 years. 3, I was very clear I had absolutely zero desire to stay home and be a housewife. I respect stay-at-home mothers, but my work is my life, and I would go crazy at home all day. This just isn't a lifestyle I want whatsoever. Finally, I am not comfortable putting my child in daycare until she's old enough to express herself verbally. As a victim of molestation when I was young, I just do not trust people enough to leave my daughter in the hands of strangers when she would be unable to report abuse or neglect. Our daughter is 9 weeks old today, and I am preparing to return to my practice in a few weeks. This weekend, I left my husband alone with our daughter while I attended a medical conference out of state. The conference was amazing, but when I returned home, my husband began acting weird. Today, when my daughter was napping, I pressed him to tell me what was wrong. He absolutely broke down and said he doesn't think he can do this. He expressed how trapped, alone, and overwhelmed he felt all weekend. He now wants me to extend my maternity leave and is talking about trying to get his job back. This made me freak out, and I asked, well, what will we do with our daughter now? He responded by suggesting I leave my practice and work from home. I said absolutely not, and he suggested daycare. At this point, I just lost my shit and screamed. If I knew you were going to back out of your promise to take care of our daughter, I would have never had your child. She says, I know I completely overreacted. No, she did not. And I would never trade our daughter for anything. I love her so much, but I am so upset with my husband, and I'm not sure how to move forward at this point. And I like how Ask Aubrey, who posted it, said, funny how he couldn't spend a weekend with his infant, but expects her to give up her career and do it when he was the one that wanted the kid. And what's absolutely incredible about this story is this guy is hardly an outlier. I just saw this bombshell report in The Guardian a couple days ago. The headline says, men who receive paid paternity leave want fewer children, study finds. I've said this for a while. I know far more women who don't want kids than I know men who don't want kids, and it's pretty obvious why. And that's because in the vast majority of situations, it takes literally nothing out of the man to have a kid. The woman is the one making all of the sacrifices. Let's dig in. Parents who received paid paternity leave took longer to have another child, and men's desire for more children dropped, a study in Spain has found. The progressive reform towards gender equality may have changed the way men in the Mediterranean countries see fertility. The introduction of paternity leave in Spain, like in other countries, was part of a set of policies designed to promote gender equality both in the labor market and at home. When I tell you guys the government can't fix this stuff, I know what I'm talking about. Gonzalez, who was one of the researchers behind the report, says that the program was meant to promote fertility, as Spain is a low fertility country, but it seemed to have had the opposite effect. According to the study, which was recently published in the Journal of Public Economics, the introduction of paid paternity leave has led to delays in fertility for eligible Spanish couples, with many waiting longer to have additional children. Additionally, the reform made men drop their desired number of children. This is not necessarily a negative outcome. The researchers found fathers spent more time with their offspring. They're spending more time with the child they already have, Gonzalez said, so her theory is that they could value investing more in this child versus having more of them. Or it could also be that dads are learning about how hard it is to take care of a child, and this new information is affecting their preferences for how many children they want to have in total. I think it's the latter. The article also says that prior to the introduction of the reform, men were more likely to desire more children than their partners and spent less time with their offspring. Additionally, fathers in Spain were making little to no use of paternal leave and did little housework, according to the Spanish Times study cited in the new report. After the policy was introduced, the researchers determined fathers who would have been eligible for paternity leave did almost an hour more childcare a day from 2009 to 2010 compared to ineligible fathers. So you're telling me these men got paternity leave, got to stay at home for weeks on end, and they did an hour more of childcare, and that hour more of childcare contributed to them wanting less kids. RFH, which is a very, very funny Twitter account, wrote, "Every instance of monogamy in nature is accompanied by fathers who take on at least half of the childcare. Birds are uniquely monogamous because bird fathers are highly involved and active parents. Monogamy only makes sense in this context. Without such high parental involvement, a monogamous female will always become resentful because a father that doesn't take on half of the childcare duties is a net drain, not an asset to the female. If he does not take on half of the childcare responsibilities, he is just another being with demands that the female is coerced into obliging because the male is larger and stronger. The male must either be only a mere vehicle for novel genes, or he must be an equally invested parent. Human females are uniquely resentful of human males because the human male is unique in his demand to act like a sperm vehicle while being treated as an equal contributor." She's often tongue-in-cheek, but she's very rarely wrong, and I have to co-sign everything she said. Too many of these men seem to literally just think they're the main character, when really, true masculinity, being a father, is about servanthood. It is about serving your family, taking care of your family, laying your life down for your family. And again, I just have such a great dad, and I witnessed my husband being such a great dad. Like, I cannot wrap my mind around these scenarios I come across. This is another Ask Aubrey repost from Reddit titled, "My husband skipped his back surgery and now I want a divorce." So for context, my husband, 41 male, and I, 40 female, have both had back injuries. I went to physical therapy for my several injuries and got better. I worked my body back from pregnancies, and now I am a bodybuilder. My husband, on the other hand, spent the last 20 years avoiding work. "I can't mow the lawn. I might hurt my back. Even though you're pregnant, you have to do it because you're smaller than me. You won't get hurt as easily. I can't help with the kids. I might hurt my back. I can't clean the garage. I might hurt my back." Those are some of the things he would say almost daily. I did hurt my back doing those things. As a 4'11" woman and he a 6'3" man, which is sus to begin with, he always put much more burden on me than he was willing to take on himself. Fast forward to last year, his disc started breaking down and he has constant pain. So then he helps even less than before. Around the same time, my back was injured from doing the things that had to be done that he never tried to help with. We both signed up for physical therapy. I went every week and did the workouts at home. He went once and gave up. My back got better, his didn't. I lost 20 pounds and turned my body into solid muscle. My 18-year-old bodybuilding son became my coach. I've always loved fitness, but after my twins were born 6 years ago, it was so hard to find time to work out effectively, especially with my husband not wanting to be active and taking care of the twins. "You're breastfeeding, they only want you, so I can't help you," he would say. His back got worse and worse to the point where he couldn't bend over at all. We consulted a surgeon and his surgery was supposed to be 2 days ago. As they were prepping him for surgery, he decided he didn't want it and walked out. He claims he's not in as much pain and that for the next year or two, he has to keep doing what he's been doing, which means not helping with the kids or house at all, and that somehow is going to make him better. He's also not willing to join the gym or go to physical therapy. It seems like he really just wants to use it as an excuse, and I'm so over it. I'm already doing everything myself. Why should I be carrying around his dead weight too? Yesterday, I was showing off my progress wearing pants 2 sizes smaller than last year and muscle definition in my whole body, and while I was excitedly bouncing around in my smaller clothes, he asked if I was drunk and told me I looked silly. I told him I don't really care what he thinks anymore. Not going to let him put me down and mock me for working on myself while he sits on his behind doing nothing. The fury I would feel, and I don't understand how you as a man are existing like this and not embarrassed. You should be so embarrassed to show your face. And I want you all to know that other women are watching this. We are listening to other women. As I discussed on last week's episode, many of us do pay attention to what older women have gone through, the warnings that they're giving. We're watching this kind of stuff go down. As this Twitter account said, men are way more to blame for women's lack of interest in children and marriage than feminism could ever be. The call is coming from inside the house. You are the problem. And again, back to those generational curses, your kids are also looking at your examples, and they are going to use that when they are trying to figure out how they should behave, how they should act, how they should treat women, or if they are girls, in looking at how men treat them and how they should evaluate future husbands.
Fathers teach their sons how to treat women. In the past, I've gotten a lot of flack for saying that. But think about it like this. Women respond off of the stimulus that men give to them. But men experience that response. Fathers ultimately teach their sons how to treat women so they can get favorable responses. So if you need a little bit more proof, I'll go ahead and give you some. Boys that grow up with good father figures tend to make wives. And boys that don't grow up with good father figures tend to make baby mamas.
Being a parent is more than being a sperm donor. It's more than being there for the off 1% chance that an intruder breaks in and you have to protect your family. It is about actually raising your kids, instructing them, teaching them, guiding them, imparting wisdom. And if you don't have any wisdom to impart, stop having kids. Okay? It is your job to be raising your kids to be upstanding citizens in the world. You need to teach them to be people of character. And you need to do that not only through disciplining them and instructing them, but by leading via your example.
Undisciplined boys grow up to be undisciplined men. Do you know the problem you're going to have?
Yes.
Undisciplined men end up in the hospital or in a prison, or they end up in a grave. That's what happens to undisciplined men. I got 4 daughters and 3 sons. I have raised my sons entirely different than I raised them girls, because I had to. Because of the different set of expectations on the boys. Now, do I want my girls to be successful? Yes. Do I want them to get equal pay? Yes. Do I want them to be treated fairly? Yes. Do I let men run over them? Ain't no way. I've raised my daughters to be strong, independent, and all of that. All my girls got college degrees, but them sons of mine, and they mothers know, let me have these boys.
Do you think when we talk about the fatherlessness epidemic, it hits boys differently? Men need to be held accountable by other men. And too many kids in America are growing up with dads who are present, who are in the home, but that are completely checked out, that are totally MIA.
I was recently talking to a friend who's a new mom, and she was telling me that she's really exhausted because her husband has been golfing every weekend, and she feels like she never gets a break. She says he's basically gone Saturdays and Sundays because it's the spring and the summer, and they're part of a country club, and he's just always golfing. And she's feeling really resentful because she feels like she doesn't get any time to herself or just even to help on the weekends. And it made me start to think about golf culture and how we've totally normalized this idea that men deserve a huge chunk of time every single weekend away from the home and family to spend on a hobby that they love, right? When a man tells you he's a golfer, you just assume that he spends a lot of time golfing, because in order to be good at golfing, you have to golf quite often. And not only that, golf is this unique hobby where it's not just something you do for yourself, but you do it with other people, your friends, your family, or even your coworkers. And so it has all these like added layers to it. But it would be really strange if you talked to a mother, a new mother, or even a mother of older kids, and she told you that she spends every Saturday and Sunday out of the home for 6 to 8 hours a day, and that oftentimes when she comes home, she's so tired from being out in the sun that she takes a nap, and that her husband does all the childcare on the weekends and she goes out with her friends. That would be strange. People would say to her, whoa, why did you have kids if you aren't going to spend time with them? Don't you want to spend your weekends with your children and your partner? Why even bother having a family if you don't actually want to be a part of that family? But when a man tells you that he golfs on the weekends, that he frequently is golfing and has a tea time every Saturday morning, you go, that makes sense. It's his hobby. It's his hobby. And that is why so many women have a hard time with a partner who golfs, is because it gives them permission to spend time on themselves and away from their family. But women are shamed when they do the same thing. They are looked at as a bad mother. But for men, it is looked as just like an assumed thing that they would do if they're a golfer.
She's absolutely right. If women were to develop this kind of hobby and peace out every weekend for hours on end, they would be criticized and shamed to no end. I don't know why or how this got so normalized. Yes, you can have a hobby. You can go do things like this on occasion, but you chose to have kids, right? Again, you chose to do that. You don't have to. You can opt out, as I have, but if you choose to, you don't get to just dip out and go act like a frat bro every weekend and leave your female partner to do all the heavy lifting, to do the actual child rearing, because your kids are in school most of the time throughout the week, right? They are in school. Maybe you see them for a few hours in the evenings when you get home from work or they're getting home from school. The weekend is the dominant amount of time you have to spend around them, to influence them, to impact them. And so if a man is dipping out for a significant portion of time every weekend, that's a deadbeat dad. All of this behavior is bad. I know I said earlier that men who are totally MIA are like the worst of the worst. And now I'm kind of doubting myself on that, because I think my next category is actually the worst of the worst. I don't know what I was talking about. The worst of the worst kinds of deadbeat men are the abusers, the cheaters, the abusers, the people that give the women grounds for divorce. And I want to talk about how this impacts the kids. I think everybody's very aware of how devastating that is for their partner, for the woman in the scenario. But for some reason, it seems we often do not connect those actions to the impacts that they have on their children, even into adulthood.
If hypothetically my dad had an affair and is now dating the woman and basically living with her, when is the right time to meet this person? Because right now I'm in between the feeling of I never want to meet her ever and I just want to get it over with, but I just don't even know what I would say to her. Thanks for ruining my life, ruining my family, but let's just put it behind us. I have a great relationship now. It's been about 5 months, I think. I found out on Christmas Eve. I think the reason I'm struggling with this decision right now is because I want a relationship with my dad. He values her so much. Seems like I just kind of have to get it out of the way and meet her if I want to spend time with my dad, which honestly is a red flag within itself. I already went through the grieving process, or the anger process, of blocking my dad, not speaking to him, hating him. But now I do want a relationship with him now that I'm home. Kind of put that past me. I guess since she kind of lives there, I haven't even seen his new house. I haven't seen my grandma in months, who used to live with me, because I haven't even been to his house where she lives now. I would just have no intents of being like a complete bitch to his girlfriend. Don't think being mean to her will do anything for me. Yeah, she made her mistakes, but I don't know, karma will get her ass. I don't have enough energy to hate her or make her pay for what she did. That's not my intent. There's this fine line between me being respectful enough to her and to my dad and respectful to my mom, because my mom has gotten the shit end of the stick of this whole situation, every single aspect. So the last thing I would ever want to do is disrespect my mom, my dad, and his new girlfriend. The shitty part about this is I want my dad to be happy. I feel like if they had just done it the right way, and even if they ended up dating in the end, I would have a perfectly fine relationship with her. They selfishly ruined everyone's life for a minute. It ruined my whole entire Christmas break. It ruined my second semester of freshman year of college, and maybe they'll never understand that. And I don't know if she really cares, because I think if she cared, she wouldn't have done it. I guess the only way to describe it is, as they were falling in love and starting a life together, we were left blindsided. I just don't know how you move past that. I need like a podcast or something so I can tell you guys. If anyone's been through something like this, first of all, I'm so sorry. It's the worst. If you have any advice, the right timeline to meet her, or how we should go about certain things, please let me know. I'm dying for some advice. My DMs are always open and I'd be really grateful. Also, I feel like I should just preface that this isn't a video about hating my dad. This is just me asking for advice and explaining my situation, and I just feel like hate and negativity doesn't solve anything. So, love you guys.
When I first came across this video, I sort of watched it like you do like an animal in a zoo, because it's just so foreign to me to think about being in this situation with my parents. And I was trying to figure out, like, how would I feel? What would I do? And I think probably I would just want nothing to do with ever knowing the person your dad had an affair with. So I went to the comments because I wanted to see how other people were reacting to this, because my reaction was pretty visceral. And the thing that shocked me was not that other people also felt very strongly about this TikTok. It was the number of people who have apparently also lived this TikTok. One commenter said, "I was in the same situation and it is easier to blame it on her, but it truly is all on you. The dad, he owed loyalty to your mom. It's okay if you are not going to have a relationship with her." Another person said, "I made it very clear with my dad a long time ago that if he wanted a relationship with me, she wouldn't be involved in it." Another person said, "As someone that has been in this situation for years now, I'd stay low contact. Go at your own speed. Don't let them manipulate or force you into a relationship." Another person said, I've lived this. My father did the same thing to my mom and I haven't seen or spoken to him since I was 19, just turned 40. I made the right decision. Another one said, I never met her and they broke up like 2 years later. Another person said, I have zero relationship with my dad's wife, mistress for a while, and never intend to. I speak to my dad and have a relationship with him, though. His selfishness means never having everyone together. Another one wrote, going on 20 years of not seeing my dad or meeting his wife he found while still married. Someone else said, it's been around 5 years for me, just turned 18, never met her. And another person said, I'm in this situation. I still have a relationship with my dad, but have set clear boundaries about her. He tries to push at those borders sometimes, but I always hold firm. What in the HELL hockey sticks? The trauma of having a parent cheat on another parent feels like it would be immense. I saw other people in the comments expressing feelings of like, even if he didn't love my mom, why wasn't I enough? Why didn't he value keeping the family together? And not only do you have to live through that, but now you're expected to just get over it, to swallow all of that, to betray your mom or your father if it goes in reverse and have a relationship with this person. I can't even imagine asking that of your kid. In order to be the kind of person that does this, you either have to be either completely diabolical, right? Completely devoid of empathy and any character and any morality. Or I think you have to be a deeply, deeply wounded person. And in the latter category, I have some sympathy, but I also have a lot of animosity because you know if you are a deeply unhealed person. You know that. You know if you're not well. Why did you choose to have kids?
Some of you, your dad, he was not a good guy. He was an evil man. He would cheat on your mom. He would be violent. He was not good at work. He was not dependable. He had maybe addiction, or he was just an angry, grumpy, violent man. And if you dug into his story, you would realize that there was some trauma and some brokenness and some hurt and some bitterness in his past that explained him. But he's using it as an excuse to hurt people because people hurt him. And what he's doing, he's not healing from the pain and the brokenness. He's multiplying it, usually to his wife and children. They always feel like the victim. And if you tell them, hey, that's not right, that's wrong, that's evil, you can't say that, you can't do that, immediately they'll get very indignant and very self-righteous. They'll bow up, they'll get loud, they'll get domineering, they'll get overbearing, they'll get intimidating, and then they will start to tell you about all the pain in their life so that you'll have sympathy and compassion on them, which just allows them to continue to do evil.
Trauma and pain in a person's background can absolutely help you to better understand them and explain some of their actions, but it does not excuse it. Period. I am so sick of people using these kinds of backgrounds or using their mental illnesses as an excuse to hurt other people. It doesn't give you an excuse. You are an autonomous individual. It is still your job to go work through that and to heal and to not procreate or damage other people until you've done that, okay? You shouldn't be in relationships, and you certainly should not be having kids if you're in that situation. And this is why the red pill's demonization of therapy pisses me off, because a lot more men need a lot more therapy. They need some help. And there's no shame in that. There should be no stigma around that. I think there is light at the end of the tunnel. As somebody who has gone through cognitive behavioral therapy at more than one point in my life, it is a lifesaver. It's a wonderful thing. You can address your issues. You can work through things. You can heal relationships. It takes a lot of work. It takes some fortitude. It takes some mental toughness, but you can do it. And you don't have an excuse not to. In working through my outline for this episode, I really started wondering, like, which is worse? Would it be worse to be a kid and just have a dad that was totally MIA and who you never knew? Or would it be worse to have one of these dads that was like semi-present or even totally around, but just not actually that active in your life, not actually participating in the true job of parenting? And interestingly, I found other people speaking to this.
What do you think is worse? A child having a deadbeat father that's inconsistent and comes in and out of the child's life, or a child having a deadbeat father that just abandons the child and stays away, and why? Me personally, I feel like having an inconsistent father is worse because I feel like it's setting the child up for disappointment and broken promises, because men that are inconsistent in their child's life have a tendency of making promises to their child and never fulfilling those promises, and the child is left wondering like why the father never did what he said he was going to do. I feel like a child having an inconsistent father is basically like teaching that child you're only loved and made to feel important at the convenience and time of that father. I also feel like the idea of a child waiting for their father to pick them up because the father said they were going to pick them up and the father never shows up, that's just like telling a child, I had something better to do than spend quality time with you, my own child. I feel like that's a lot more damaging to a child than a man completely abandoning his child. I feel like it's more damaging to a child to come in and out of their life whenever it's convenient for you, because you're basically teaching that child that the child is only important or loved at your convenience or on your time
shaming. And if it's one thing we know for a fact about a child, is a child needs stability and they need consistency. So I feel like a father coming in and out of the child's life is more damaging than the father just completely walking away and never asking about that child again. So if you agree or disagree with me, let me know why.
As I was listening to her video and a few others, it made me think of this rat study. And I talk about the rat study all the time. I think this is my first time talking about it on the show, which is honestly surprising, but I'm sure I'll bring it up again because I think this is fascinating research. I found an article summarizing this research in a more digestible way, so I'm going to read to you from it. It says, I want you to imagine that there's a laboratory, and in the laboratory there is a rat in a cage. The scientists in the lab are studying behavior. In one corner of the rat cage, there's a little lever. Every time the rat pushes on the lever, a pellet of food comes out. Needless to say, the rat is preoccupied with pushing the lever and getting the pellets that come out every time he pushes the lever. So the scientists wonder what will happen if they remove the pellets. The rat pushes on the lever and eventually realizes it is not going to yield any pellets, and so he loses interest with the lever and preoccupies himself with other things. What these experiments had in common is that there was a predictable pattern in terms of expectation. This is called continuous reinforcement. In the first experiment, the pattern was I push the lever and I can expect a pellet to come out. In the second, the pattern was I push the lever and I can expect nothing to come out. So the scientists start to wonder what will happen if they make the pattern unpredictable. What if sometimes, but unpredictably, when the rat pushes the lever, a pellet comes out and sometimes it doesn't? They imagined that the rat would become frustrated and eventually lose interest in the lever. In fact, the opposite happened. In this experiment, again and again, each rat became absolutely anxiously obsessed with the lever and neglected all of its other grooming habits and started deteriorating, like they literally wouldn't eat. The rat was engaged in an intermittent reinforcement experiment, and the intermittent reinforcement had created an addiction. Also, when the scientists first gave the rat intermittent reinforcement and then later gave them the continuous reinforcement of no pellets in response to them pressing the lever, the rat stayed obsessed with the lever despite receiving nothing. The rat had grown accustomed to periods of time where no reinforcement was given. The intermittent reinforcement had created persistence in the face of resistance. Intermittent reinforcement applies to much more than just rewards and wanted things. For the sake of this episode, we're going to assume that intermittent reinforcement applies to things you want that are only granted inconsistently, unpredictably, and occasionally. But conversely, intermittent reinforcement also applies to things like rules and personal boundaries that are only enforced inconsistently, unpredictably, and occasionally. This causes people to become confused and either become terrified about how to interact with the person setting the rule or boundary, or conversely, to push the limits until they get what they want from the person setting the rule or boundary. Intermittent reinforcement causes addiction. Think about gambling. Gambling is an addiction that rests on the laurels of intermittent reinforcement. If you are sitting at a slot machine, you may try to predict the pattern of reward, but you cannot. It is randomized, but the high that comes as a result of the experience of the random reward creates obsession. You become owned by the game. And you can see this theory play out across all kinds of abusive relationships, right? I've said before, this is one reason that women or men, when they're in domestic abuse situations, often don't leave when you as an outsider think that a normal common sense person would leave. It's because their brain has become addicted to the intermittent reinforcement that they are getting from that person occasionally being nice to them. But that can also be true of a child with an inconsistent parent. And this is so emotionally and mentally damaging. It is abuse. If a child is only getting intermittent reinforcement from a parent who dips in and out of their lives, who's occasionally nice to them and then disappears, that in and of itself is going to be abuse. It's going to create trauma, and it probably is going to create an obsession with them where they are constantly trying to win that parent's love and favor. I also think a parent like dipping in and out of a child's life prevents that child from being able to form healthy, long-lasting relationships with better male figures. It also teaches them a horrible idea of what masculinity looks like and what women will accept. Because if you watch your mom accept this kind of behavior over and over and over, not only will you begin to think it's okay and to think you can replicate it, you're also probably going to lose respect for women to some degree.
Hey, thanks for your comment and post. Just want to affirm you and just say that that's not okay, and I'm sorry you're going through that. I'm a psychologist and training on person, I work a lot with kids. And I got to tell you, one of the worst things that a man can do is just be inconsistent in their kid's life. For example, if you have split time with them where he has visitation rights and he's not coming consistently or on time, it really does more harm than good. And these poor kiddos, man, and I sit with them. I do therapy with them. The amount of rejection and like low self-esteem that they feel, it's unfathomable. And honestly, it really breaks my heart and I get very angry. I have a son, and his mother and I were not together. We're still not together, and we had split time. And I always made sure I picked my kiddo up on time. I always made sure that he could count on me and be consistent because he's a young man. I want to model to him what manhood is, and a part of that is being true to your commitments. So I hope things go better for you, and I appreciate you just being vulnerable and sharing your story here. Hey, have a great day. Thanks.
To be clear, this is just as damaging if the behavior is coming from the mother figure. It just simply doesn't happen as often. I'm not saying it never happens. I actually have 2 cases in my personal life where I've observed women like this, but it is more rare. And while I think there can certainly be mother wounds, there can be bad impacts on society from bad mothers. I talked about that in my Boy Moms episode. The impacts of fatherlessness are just simply unmatched. Our society, our families, our kids, they are desperate for real men to look to. And I think that's why you see so many of these grifters in the red pill space stepping in to fill this void. It's terrible advice. It's awful guidance. They're often playing on insecure men who don't have a lot of wisdom, who haven't been given a lot of instruction, and they're profiting off of them. Just to summarize, there are emotional and psychological impacts from fatherlessness. There's an increased risk of mental health issues, low self-esteem, and identity issues. There's also a lot of behavioral problems that are attached to this, like an increased risk of delinquency and substance abuse. There's also academic and social consequences. Many of these kids have difficulty forming healthy relationships with peers and authority figures, and they also tend to have difficulties in school, including lower grades and higher dropout rates. Their households are more prone to financial instability. As I've said, single parent households often have lower incomes, which can lead to economic hardships. And there are other limited opportunities. Economic constraints can limit access to extracurricular activities, educational resources, and other opportunities. If you just have one parent, their ability to get you to all of the opportunities you might have is certainly diminished. And these kids often have relational issues. They have trust issues and difficulty forming deep bonds with other people and maintaining romantic relationships. And I want to be clear in saying this, that while these things are often true about kids who grow up with deadbeat dads or absent dads, they are not prescriptive. There are still many, many people who rise above these statistics, who are incredibly resilient. As this research points out, a strong supportive mother can mitigate many of the negative effects. Again, you should be championing and supporting single mothers and also having extended family support. There are a lot of people who step into these kinds of voids left by these delinquent fathers, including step parents, teachers, pastors, and other community leaders that can make a world of difference in that kid's life. I cannot stand the shaming we direct at the kids in these situations, right? It's sinister, and it's particularly common in the red pill spaces where you'll often see them mocking women for having daddy issues. Having daddy issues is not your fault. You are not your parent. You are not responsible for their choices. You are not the reason for their choices. And you should not be judged based on the harm they have done to you. The only person that should be getting shamed in this entire equation is the man. It's the man, and it's time we talk about it. And if you jump into my comments with like whataboutism and trying to escape this, I have no time or patience for it. I really don't. Because again, this epidemic is a generational curse that is going to continue to impact our society if we don't get a hold of it. It's absolutely inexcusable. And instead of blaming the people who are responsible for it, we blame all of their victims. All right, guys, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I can't wait to read your thoughts. We will be having a lighter week on YouTube this week, given the 4th of July holiday. So I hope you've had a great time celebrating that. And until next week, stay based. If you like this episode, don't forget to check out others in my series, Histrionics, here. And you can watch my other weekly show, the Base Politics Podcast, here.